I never had the good fortune to meet Olaf Petersen, although he was a Westie like myself. But when he became very ill in his latter years and was hospitalised, and it was his family that approached the museum to see if we'd be interested in the collection. And I remember going out to the house and going into the shed and seeing all these sort of boxes all stacked up on shelves. And Shaun will discuss this with you later, because there's all sorts of interesting information written all over the boxes too. In the mid-30s, his mother was a photographer, an amateur photographer. She had a camera and she used to process her own negatives and prints, and that was possibly the major inspiration for him. And then it's alleged that Henry Winkleman, the famous Auckland photographer, in his retirement moved out to Swanson and was possibly a neighbour, and he impressed Olaf, and he went out and bought a camera similar to his mother's, and then he eventually started buying much better cameras and went through many rollers and eventually got a Hasselblad. It was his favourite. Yeah.
Those all be black and white then in those files?
These are all black and white, but he's best known for his black and white photography, but as we'll find out, he did a lot of colour as well. And but his black and white was his first love. So I was saying he was very methodical, and in the manuscript collection, he compiled many scrapbooks like this, and you can see that's the New Zealand Herald and Weekly News clippings in there, and he collected these and stuck them in, and stuck them with some tape. You're not going to appreciate that. Yeah. So he was doing that, and then of course he always got another copy that he'd get a copy to cut up for the scrapbook, then he would get another copy that he would preserve. And this is incidentally what the Weekly News looked like in its early days, with pink cover.
Right. I'm going to go through some boxes that haven't been opened by anyone since they came in. They didn't come in those boxes, they were actually originally piled up in big stacks, and when the museum acquired the collection they transferred them into these boxes. So since then they've sat in the store waiting for us to get to them, because we've, as you can see, worked on some of the other parts of the collection, like the small prints. We've put the negatives into cold storage so that they would last for longer, but now I thought it's time we bring out the large prints, and I'll show you first. This all started with this exhibition that we're in now, because we thought actually that we were weak in wildlife photography when we were asked to contribute to the show, and this is what we actually came up with. These two are actually Petersen, this one and this one here. And this is particularly famous as it was a competition one. So I'm going to show you the folder that we first took out, which is just from the top of those boxes. So this is pretty much how they come. They're just basically stacked inside the boxes, and you don't know what you're going to find. Often, if you're lucky, signed. I think so, yes. I quite like it because it's an unusual self-portrait. So the process that we usually go through for rehousing things is we take them out of these acid-rich surrounds, we interleave them with paper that I've got under here, and we end up putting them in a box that's acid-free and basically stacking them in those. So it's a tremendous picture. And this is the sort of thing that he excels at, patience. Through looking through a lot of his pictures, I always get a feeling that, I think Colin was telling us a story the other day actually about when he was driving along and suddenly he'd see something, he'd stop the car, he'd get out of the car, and then he'd look up at the clouds, and if the clouds weren't quite right, he'd lie down and take a nap. And then he'd just spontaneously wake up when he was ready to take his picture. So there's an eye for seeing the picture, but there's also the patience to make the picture the way you want it. If anybody, did any of you do art at high school? You might remember cartridge paper. It's very similar to that. It's called barrier paper. But what it does is it blocks the acid migration. So we always, if we've got a cardboard backing, we put that first. Sorry, that was your job. And then we'll put the photograph on top. And then take the sheet of this is called phototex. So this is a bit like tissue paper, but it's very, very fine and it's not fluffy like tissue. So it's specifically for photographs. We use it a lot in things like albums. We stick it between the pictures in the pages.
What's it called?
Phototex.
Text.
Tex, T-E-X. One of the images that we highlighted just to advertise this talk actually was quite a wonderful picture. So he called this Through the Enchanted Forest. He's basically walked into the forest and set up an exposure in such a way that you'd have to be incredibly patient to do. My personal reaction to this is almost like a dream world. It creates, the longer exposure, allowing the light to be captured coming through the trees all around you. It's like you've woken up in some sort of stupor and you're looking around and you don't know where you are. So
there's lots of kind of stories within
and
as well.
A lot of reactions can be observed. So this is how he submitted this. It's a Photographic Society folder, and there were judges that would have commented on this. And the judges have their own say. So this is where you get some of the just go to Gordon's favourite one.
To be niggly, perhaps a little darkening of the base, and oh, I'm not terribly keen on the title.
Here's another one. This is beautiful, Olaf. I like the newspaper print at the time, and could imagine how a good print would look. It's a most unusual formation, and we certainly were most fortunate to be there at the right time. With only minutes to spare, this could have been one that got away. Through a long experience, the action must have been almost instinctive. Rings the bell in all departments, perhaps not quite so loudly retitled. And because we try and keep everything in an archival order, we won't separate this yet. This folder is actually not good for the photograph either, but the information is too precious to be separated from it until we actually sit down and catalogue this whole thing and record it all in our database. And then we'll have an intellectual link between these. So if we do separate these, for example, I often work closely with the manuscripts librarian, and sometimes I'll transfer this sort of material to his collection, which is all about writing and the written record that people keep.
What about the negatives, Gordon? Are they classified, numbered? How did you rank the 50,000 negatives?
So most of his negatives are like this.
Still gold.
And you can imagine what would happen if we lost these. Because the information about those negatives is inside the box. So one of the projects I'm lining up is to not only digitise the boxes, but then go through all the roll film and work out the best way we can preserve it, but keep it united with information.
And a lot of the boxes are like this, where Olaf has gone through and changed the organisation, so there's a new listing inside.
How do you know if it's like this or it's like this?
A lot of detective work.